The message arrived without warning on a Tuesday morning, and it changed everything for humanity. Kyle Martinez stood in his office on the diplomatic vessel Horizon's Edge and read the transmission for the third time. His hands trembled slightly as he held the data pad. The Galactic Tribunal wanted Earth to appear before them in 30 days, and the tone of the message was not friendly. There were no explanations and no details about what humanity had supposedly done wrong, just a cold command to present themselves for judgment. Kyle was 52 years old with gray hair at his temples and tired eyes that had seen too many difficult negotiations. He had been Earth's primary ambassador to the Galactic Cooperative for 7 years now, and he thought he understood how things worked in the galaxy. Apparently he had been wrong. Nothing in his experience had prepared him for this kind of summons. Lisa Grant walked into his office without knocking. She was his chief advisor and the smartest person he knew when it came to alien politics. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun and her expression was worried. She had obviously received the same message. They looked at each other for a long moment without speaking. Finally, Lisa broke the silence with a question that Kyle had been asking himself since the message arrived. What did we do? Kyle shook his head slowly. He had no answer. Humanity had been part of the Galactic Cooperative for 15 years, and during that time they had been careful to follow all the rules. Sure, they had been aggressive in their expansion, and their businesses competed hard with alien companies, but nothing they did was illegal. At least Kyle did not think so. Now he was not so sure about anything. The journey to Tribunal Station took 12 long days. Kyle spent most of that time reviewing every treaty humanity had signed, and every agreement they had made with other species. Lisa and her team worked around the clock searching for anything that might explain why they had been summoned. They found nothing that seemed serious enough to warrant this kind of response. A few minor trade disputes that had been resolved, some complaints about human colonists being too loud and aggressive in their business practices, nothing that should bring them before the highest court in the galaxy. Peter Hughes was the youngest member of their diplomatic team at 28 years old. He was brilliant but inexperienced, and this crisis was making him nervous. He kept asking Kyle what they should do if the tribunal decided to punish Earth. Kyle did not have good answers for him. The truth was that the Galactic Cooperative had enormous power. If they decided humanity had broken their laws, they could impose sanctions that would cripple Earth's colonies. They could cut off trade routes. In the worst case, they could even expel humanity from the cooperative entirely. That would be a disaster. Earth's economy depended on trade with alien worlds. Millions of humans lived on colony planets that needed supplies from both Earth and alien trading partners. If humanity was expelled, it would not just hurt them economically. It could destroy everything they had built over the past 15 years. Tribunal Station appeared in their view screens on the morning of the 12th day. It was enormous and ancient and more than a little intimidating. The station looked like a crystal flower with 5 massive petals arranged in a circle. Each petal was a different color representing one of the 5 founding species of the cooperative. The Verdine had the green petal. The Korthax had red. The Selenar had blue. The Torvin had yellow and the Yalith had purple. At the center, where all 5 petals met, was the tribunal chamber itself. The Horizon's Edge docked at the human visitor port, and Kyle took a moment to straighten his formal diplomatic suit before leaving the ship. Lisa walked beside him carrying a secure case filled with documents. Peter and the rest of their small team followed behind. The corridor leading to the tribunal chamber was lined with representatives from dozens of different species. Some watched with curiosity. Others looked at the human delegation with something that might have been hostility. Kyle kept his face neutral and his pace steady. Whatever was waiting for him in that chamber, he would face it with dignity. The tribunal chamber took his breath away when he first entered it. The room was circular and enormous with a domed ceiling that displayed a real-time map of the entire galaxy. 5 platforms were arranged around the outer edge of the chamber, and each one was elevated high above the floor. On those platforms sat the judges who would decide humanity's fate. At the center of the room was a single circle of light on the floor. That was where the accused would stand alone to face judgment. Kyle had studied all 5 of the founding species, but seeing them in person was different. The Verdine on the first platform looked like giant insects with multiple eyes and clicking mandibles. The Korthax on the second platform were huge reptilian creatures with scales that gleamed under the chamber lights. The Selenar on the third platform were beings made of pure energy. that communicated through pulses of light and sound. The Torvin on the fourth platform were amphibious and lived inside special water-filled tanks that allowed them to survive outside their ocean worlds. The fifth platform held the Yalith, who looked like enormous trees with branches that moved and shifted constantly. These 5 species had founded the Galactic Cooperative over 6,000 years ago. They had been exploring space when humans were still living in caves. Their civilizations were ancient beyond human comprehension. And now Kyle had to stand before them and defend his entire species. The Vridine representative spoke first. Its voice came through translation devices embedded in the walls of the chamber. The words were cold and formal. Ambassador Kyle Martinez of Earth, you stand before the Galactic Tribunal to answer for the crimes of humanity. Kyle stepped into the circle of light. He was alone now, as protocol demanded. Lisa and the others had to wait at the edge of the chamber. He stood in that spotlight and looked up at the 5 platforms towering above him. He felt very small and very human in that moment. But he also felt angry. Crimes. They were calling humanity's actions crimes without even telling them what those actions were. He kept his voice calm and professional when he spoke. I am here and I am ready to answer any questions you have. But first I must know what charges have been brought against my people. The Korthax representative leaned forward, and the movement was like a mountain shifting. Its voice was deep and rumbling when it answered. Humanity is charged with 53 separate violations of cooperative law. These violations include unauthorized military expansion across multiple sectors, aggressive colonization practices that disregard the rights of other species, cultural contamination of younger developing species, and most seriously the development of weapons technology that is explicitly prohibited under the founding charter. Each word hit Kyle like a physical blow. This was far worse than he had imagined. Any one of those charges could result in serious sanctions. All of them together could mean the end of humanity's place in the galaxy. He forced himself to breathe slowly and think clearly. He needed to see the evidence. He needed to understand exactly what they were being accused of. I request access to the detailed charges and all evidence that supports these accusations. That is my right under cooperative law. The Selenar representative responded with a burst of light that the translators converted to words. Your request is denied. The evidence is classified for security purposes. You are here to answer for your actions, not to debate legal procedures. This was wrong, and Kyle knew it. Under cooperative law, any accused species had the right to see the evidence against them. They had the right to present a defense. They had the right to a fair hearing. But none of that seemed to matter to the tribunal. They had already made up their minds. This was not a trial. This was a sentencing hearing. Kyle looked up at the 5 platforms and understood something that made his blood run cold. This was not about justice. This was about power. Humanity had been successful, and that success had made the older species nervous. Humans had established colonies faster than anyone expected. Human businesses competed aggressively and often won contracts away from alien companies. Human technology was advancing rapidly, and apparently that was not acceptable to the powers that controlled the galaxy. Over the next several hours, Kyle stood in that circle of light and listened as representatives from a dozen different species came forward with complaints against humanity. The Vridine complained that human agricultural colonies were producing food more efficiently than their farms. The Korthax complained that human military ships were too advanced for such a young species. The Selenar complained that human energy companies were winning too many infrastructure contracts. The Torvin complained that humans had claimed worlds and sectors they had been planning to colonize eventually. The list went on and on. Kyle listened to all of it and said nothing. He was not allowed to defend himself yet. Protocol required that all accusers speak first, but as he listened, he began to notice a pattern in the complaints. None of them were really about laws being broken. They were all about humans being too successful too quickly. They were about competition and economics and influence. The older species had controlled the galaxy for thousands of years. They had their territories and their trade routes and the air spheres of influence all carefully maintained. And then humanity had arrived and disrupted everything in just 15 years. The session ended without Kyle being allowed to say a single word in defense of his people. The tribunal declared that they would reconvene the next day to hear more accusations. Kyle walked out of that chamber knowing that unless something changed dramatically, Humanity was going to be found guilty. The verdict had already been decided. Now they were just going through the motions of a trial to make it look legitimate. Kyle returned to his quarters after the first day of the tribunal, and he felt exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. Lisa was already there with documents spread across every available surface. Peter sat in the corner looking pale and worried. The rest of their small team worked quietly at their stations, trying to make sense of what had happened. "This is not a trial," Lisa said what they were all thinking. "This is an execution, and they are just deciding how painful to make it." Kyle poured himself water and drank it slowly. His throat was dry from standing in that circle of light for hours. He had not been allowed to speak or sit or even move much. The tribunal had made him stand there like a criminal, while species after species came forward with their complaints. It had been designed to humiliate him and through him all of humanity. Peter looked up from his corner with fear in his young eyes. "What are we going to do? They are not even letting us defend ourselves. They have already decided we are guilty." Kyle set down his glass and walked to the window. Outside he could see the stars, and somewhere out there was Earth. Millions of humans were depending on him to protect them, and he was failing. But failure was not something Kyle accepted easily. There had to be a way out of this. There had to be something they could do. We need to understand what they really want. Kyle turned back to face his team. Every charge they brought today was technically legal under cooperative law. "We have not actually broken any rules, so why are they doing this?" Lisa pulled up a chart on her datapad and projected it onto the wall. "I have been analyzing every complaint we heard today, and there is a pattern. Every single accusation comes down to economics and influence. The Verdeen are upset because our farms are more efficient. The Korthax are worried because our military technology is advancing quickly. The Selenar lost contracts to our energy companies. The Torvin are angry because we claimed worlds they wanted but never bothered to develop. So this is about competition," Peter said slowly as understanding dawned on his face. "They are afraid of us, not afraid exactly," Lisa corrected. "They are afraid of losing their control over the galaxy. The 5 founding species have maintained the same power structure for thousands of years. They decide who gets what. They control the major trade routes. They set the rules. And then we showed up and disrupted everything in just 15 years. Kyle nodded as the pieces fell into place in his mind. "They cannot just kill us or drive us out without a reason. That would make them look like tyrants. So they are creating a legal justification for punishing us. They are using the tribunal to make it look legitimate." The realization was both frightening and oddly hopeful. If this was really about power and not actual crimes, then maybe there was a way to fight back. Kyle just had to figure out how. Over the next 2 days, the tribunal continued its parade of accusations. More species came forward with complaints. Some were legitimate grievances about aggressive human business practices. Others were petty complaints about cultural differences. But all of them painted a picture of humanity as a dangerous and destabilizing force in the galaxy. Kyle stood in his circle of light each day and listened. He was not allowed to respond yet. Protocol required that all accusers speak first before the defense could present their case. But Kyle used the time to study the 5 judges on their elevated platforms. He watched how they reacted to different accusations. He noticed which complaints seemed to resonate with them and which ones they seemed less interested in. The Verdeen seemed primarily concerned with economic issues. They reacted strongly to complaints about human trade practices. The Korthax focused on military matters and showed interest whenever someone mentioned human weapons or ships. The Selenar appeared worried about human influence spreading to younger species. The Torvin seemed angry about territorial expansion, but the Yalith were harder to read. Their branches moved in complex patterns that Kyle could not interpret. On the 3rd night, Lisa made a breakthrough. She had been going through old cooperative records looking for precedents. She found something interesting in the historical archives. 6,000 years ago, when the cooperative was first founded, there had been a similar situation. A young species called the Drenix had expanded rapidly and competed aggressively with the founding species. They had been brought before a tribunal on similar charges. "What happened to them?" Kyle asked. "They accepted limitations on their expansion and agreed to oversight of their government by the founding species." Lisa pulled up the old treaty. "Basically, they became a client state. They are still members of the cooperative, but they have never grown beyond their initial territory. They exist at the sufferance of the older species." Kyle felt anger rising in his chest. So that is what they want from us. They want to put a leash on humanity and make sure we never become powerful enough to challenge them. It looks that way, Lisa said quietly. The question is whether we can fight it. Kyle thought about Earth and all the human colonies spread across dozens of worlds. He thought about the millions of people who had left their home planet to build new lives among the stars. He thought about human engineers and scientists and entrepreneurs who were pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Could he really condemn all of that potential to stagnation, just to satisfy the fears of ancient species who could not handle competition? No, Kyle said firmly. We are not going to accept that. We are going to fight, but how? Peter asked. They control the tribunal. They control the cooperative. They have all the power, not all of it, Kyle said as an idea began forming in his mind. They have institutional power, but we have something they do not have. We have the truth on our side. And we have allies they are not expecting. He turned to Lisa with new energy. How many younger species are there in the cooperative? Species that joined after the founding 5? Lisa checked her database. 94 species have joined since the cooperative was founded. Most of them in the last 2,000 years. And how many of those species do we have good relationships with? Lisa scrolled through diplomatic records. We have active trade agreements with 47 of them, defense pacts with 12, technology sharing agreements with 17, cultural exchange programs with 32. There is significant overlap in those numbers, but overall we have positive relationships with about 60% of the younger species. Kyle smiled for the first time in days. Because we treat them as equals. We do not look down on them or try to control them. We compete with them, sure, but we also cooperate. We share technology. We help them solve problems. We do not act like we are superior just because we have been in space longer. You think they will support us? Lisa looked skeptical. They are afraid of the founding species. Everyone is, maybe, Kyle admitted. But they are also tired of being controlled. Every one of those species has probably felt the same pressure we are feeling now. The founding 5 want to keep everyone else small and manageable. What if we offered them an alternative? Peter leaned forward with interest. What kind of alternative? A reformed cooperative. Kyle began pacing as the plan took shape. One where laws apply equally to everyone. Where younger species have real representation in governance. Where success is celebrated instead of punished. If we are going down, we might as well make it mean something. We can expose what the founding species are doing and offer a vision of what the cooperative should be. That is incredibly risky, Lisa warned. If it backfires, we will not just lose, we will be destroyed. We are already going to lose if we do nothing, Kyle pointed out. The verdict is predetermined. But if we fight and if we can get enough support from other species, then maybe we can force real change. Even if humanity gets punished, at least, we will have planted the seeds for reform. Lisa looked at Peter and then back at Kyle. She took a deep breath and nodded. All right. Tell me what you need. For the next 36 hours, the human delegation worked with quiet intensity. Lisa reached out through back channels to friendly species in the cooperative. She did not ask for public support, knowing that would be too dangerous for most of them. Instead, she simply let them know what humanity had discovered about the tribunal's true purpose. She shared evidence of the selective application of laws. She pointed out the pattern of the founding species suppressing any potential competitors. The response was cautious, but positive. Many of the younger species had suspected something like this for years. They had seen friends and trading partners suddenly face tribunals on vague charges. They had watched as any species that became too successful found itself facing sanctions and restrictions. But no one had ever challenged the system before. No one had dared. Kyle also had Lisa reach out to human colonies and Earth itself. He needed the backing of his own government for what he was planning. The president of Earth listened to his proposal and was silent for a long moment. Then she gave him authorization to proceed. She also sent a message that Kyle would remember for the rest of his life. Do what you think is right, Ambassador. History will judge whether you were brave or foolish. But either way, do not let them make humanity small. On the 5th day of the tribunal, Kyle was finally allowed to speak. The Yalith announced that the defense would now have its opportunity to respond to the charges. Kyle stepped into his circle of light for what might be the last time. He looked up at the 5 platforms and the ancient beings who sat in judgment. Then he looked around at the gallery filled with representatives from dozens of species. Some hostile and some curious, and a few that gave him small nods of encouragement. Kyle took a breath and began the speech that would change everything. Kyle stood in his circle of light and began to speak with a voice that carried clearly through the massive chamber. I have listened for 5 days to accusations against humanity, and I have heard many complaints, but I have seen no actual evidence of crimes. I request that this tribunal provide specific documentation for each charge, as is required by cooperative law. The Verdeen representative's mandibles clicked in what might have been annoyance. We have provided sufficient information for these proceedings. The charges are clear, are they? Kyle asked calmly. I have heard vague accusations of military expansion, but no one has specified which deployments violate which laws. I have heard complaints about colonization, but no one has shown that we claimed any world improperly. I have heard concerns about technology sharing, but no one has demonstrated actual harm to any species. These are not charges. These are opinions. The Korthax representative leaned forward with his massive scaled body casting a shadow. You demand evidence? Very well. We shall provide it. A holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber showing a map of explored space. Red dots marked the locations of human military vessels and installations. There were many red dots scattered across dozens of sectors. To anyone watching, it looked like an invasion force spread across the galaxy. Humanity maintains military presence in 47 sectors. The Korthax's voice rumbled through the chamber. This represents unprecedented expansion for such a young species. You are clearly building an offensive military force. Kyle had expected this. Lisa had prepared counter-evidence for every charge they anticipated. He gestured, and his own holographic display appeared beside theirs. May I provide context for this evidence? The Yalith's branches moved in a pattern that seemed to indicate permission. You may proceed. Every one of these military installations is located in a sector where human colonies exist. Kyle highlighted each red dot, and beside it appeared a green dot showing a human colony. Under cooperative law, every species has the right to maintain defensive forces to protect their civilian populations. We are exercising that right. Nothing more. He expanded the display to show military deployments of other species. The Korthax maintain installations in 93 sectors, the Verdeen in 78. The Selenar have military presence in over 100 sectors. Our 47 installations are actually modest by comparison. The scale is different. The Korthax argued. Our species have existed for thousands of years. You have been in space for less than a century. Then let us compare rates of expansion rather than total numbers. Kyle brought up historical data that Lisa had spent days researching. When the Korthax first joined the cooperative, they expanded their military presence at an average rate of 12 new installations per year for the first 50 years. Humanity's expansion rate is 8 installations per year. We are actually growing slower than you did. The chamber filled with murmurs as representatives realized what Kyle was showing them. The founding species had all gone through similar expansion periods when they were young. They had built military forces and claimed territory aggressively. But now they were judging humanity by a different standard. The Verdeen tried a different approach. What about aggressive colonization? You have claimed 43 worlds in just 15 years. This is destabilizing, all of which were unclaimed worlds. Kyle responded immediately. We followed every protocol required by cooperative law. We conducted full surveys. We verified no sapient life existed on these worlds. We filed proper documentation. Every single colony is legitimate. Several of these worlds were in sectors that other species had expressed interest in. The Torvan representative's voice bubbled from their water tank. Kyle had been waiting for this argument. Expressing interest is not the same as claiming a world. Cooperative law states that a species must formally claim a world within 1 standard year of discovery and begin development within 5 years. Many of the worlds we colonized had been discovered decades or even centuries ago, but were never claimed. We simply took advantage of opportunities that others had abandoned. He pulled up specific examples. This world was discovered by the Torvan 83 years ago. No claim was filed. This one was discovered by the Verdeen 140 years ago. Also never claimed. This one was surveyed by the Korthax 200 years ago, and they explicitly decided it was not worth developing. Under cooperative law, these worlds were available for anyone to claim. We did nothing wrong. The Torvan's tank bubbled more vigorously. We were planning to eventually develop some of those worlds. Eventually is not good enough, Kyle said firmly. The law exists for a reason. You cannot hold worlds indefinitely without developing them. That would allow the older species to lock up every habitable planet in the galaxy and prevent younger species from ever expanding. Is that what you want? A cooperative where only the founding five are allowed to grow? The gallery erupted with noise as younger species began talking among themselves. Kyle had touched on something that many of them had probably thought about but never dared to say out loud. The Selenar representative flashed bright colors that translated to an angry tone. What about cultural contamination? You shared advanced technology with 17 developing species. This violates the progression protocols, Kyle nodded. This was the charge he had been most worried about. The progression protocols were taken seriously by everyone. Does it? Let me address each case individually. Lisa activated detailed files for each of the 17 species mentioned. The first case involves the Zellari. We are accused of sharing water purification technology, but the Zellari already had water purification systems. We simply showed them a more efficient design using materials native to their world. We did not introduce fundamentally new technology. We helped them improve what they already had. Kyle went through each case methodically. In every instance, humanity had shared technology that built on existing capabilities, rather than introducing completely foreign concepts. They had helped species solve immediate problems like disease or famine. They had never given anyone weapons or technology that would allow them to dominate their neighbors. Furthermore, Kyle gestured to the gallery. 12 of the 17 species in question are represented here today. They can speak for themselves about whether they feel contaminated or harmed. As if on cue, several representatives stood up in the gallery. One of them was from the Trill, a species that resembled large insects. Humanity helped us develop crops that could survive drought when our world faced environmental disaster. Without their help, millions of my people would have died. How is preventing mass death a crime? Another representative from a species called the Bentar spoke up. The Selenar discovered our world 70 years ago. They observed us but offered no help even when we suffered from diseases they could have easily cured. Humans arrived 3 years ago and immediately offered medical assistance. They saved countless lives. Why should they be punished for showing compassion? More voices joined in from the gallery. Species that humanity had helped were speaking up, despite the risk of angering the founding five. Kyle had not asked them to do this, but Lisa's quiet outreach over the past few days had clearly worked. These species were tired of being silent. Order. The Yalith's voice cut through the noise and the branches moved in commanding patterns. This tribunal will maintain proper decorum. The gallery quieted, but the damage was done. The founding species had expected the younger members of the cooperative to remain passive observers. Instead, they were becoming active participants. The carefully controlled tribunal was starting to slip from their grasp. The Yalith seemed to recognize this. The branches moved in complex patterns that might have indicated concern. There remains one final charge, the most serious accusation against humanity, the development of prohibited weapons technology. The chamber fell completely silent. This was the real reason for the tribunal. Kyle had suspected it from the beginning, but now it was out in the open. Everything else had been preparation for this moment. We have intelligence, the Yalith continued. Evidence showing that humanity is developing quantum disruption devices, weapons capable of destroying stars. This technology is explicitly forbidden under the founding charter of the cooperative. Its development alone is grounds for immediate expulsion and possibly military intervention. The holographic display changed to show complex scientific equations and energy readings. To most of the observers, it looked incomprehensible. But it looked dangerous, and that was enough. Kyle felt his heart racing. He knew exactly what they were referring to. The Helios Project. But they had completely misunderstood what that research was about. The question was whether he could make them understand before they condemned humanity. These readings are from your research station in the Kepler system, the Yalith said. The mathematical models match theoretical frameworks for stellar disruption weapons. Do you deny that this research is taking place? Kyle took a deep breath. This was the moment everything came down to. He could try to explain the science, but that would take hours and they might not believe him. He could deny everything, but the evidence was real, even if their interpretation was wrong. Or he could do something bold, something that would prove humanity's intentions beyond any doubt. I do not deny the research exists, Kyle said clearly, but I completely deny your interpretation of its purpose. We are not developing weapons. We are developing the exact opposite. The Korthax's scales rippled with what might have been disbelief. Explain. Kyle smiled slightly. Better than explain. I can demonstrate. Give me 12 hours and I will prove that our technology is not a weapon. I will prove it in a way that cannot be faked or denied. I will show you exactly what humanity has been building. The 5 representatives conferred among themselves through private channels. Kyle stood in his circle of light and waited. Lisa watched from the edge of the chamber with hope and fear mixed on her face. Peter looked like he might pass out from stress. The entire gallery held its collective breath. Finally, the Yalith spoke. What exactly are you proposing, Ambassador? A live demonstration, Kyle said. In 12 hours, my research team will activate our technology on a dying star in the Ross system. You can send observers. You can monitor everything. If our technology is truly a weapon as you claim, then you will see a star destroyed. If it is what we say it is, then you will see something very different. Something that will change your understanding of what humanity is trying to accomplish. The Yalith's branches swayed slowly. And if you simply choose not to activate any weapon during this demonstration, how does that prove anything? Then send your own scientists. Kyle spread his hands. Monitor our equipment. Verify what we are doing. We have nothing to hide. 12 hours. 1 dying star. Either we prove our innocence or we condemn ourselves. Those are the stakes I am offering. The 5 representatives conferred for what felt like an eternity, while Kyle stood in his circle of light waiting for their decision. His heart pounded in his chest, but he kept his face calm. Everything depended on the next few minutes. If they refused his proposal, then humanity would be condemned without any chance to prove their innocence. If they accepted, then humanity had 12 hours to pull off something that had never been done before. The Yalith finally spoke after 20 minutes of private discussion. We accept your proposal, Ambassador Martinez. We will send monitoring teams to the Ross system immediately. In 12 hours, you will demonstrate your technology, and we will determine whether your claims are true. But understand this clearly. If your demonstration is deceptive in any way, or if you refuse to proceed at the scheduled time, then humanity will be found guilty of all charges. The consequences will be severe, I understand, Kyle said with more confidence than he felt. We will proceed exactly as promised. The tribunal declared a recess until the demonstration was complete. As the chamber began to clear, Kyle walked quickly to where Lisa and Peter waited. His legs felt weak now that the adrenaline was wearing off, but he forced himself to stay upright. They had won a chance, but now came the hard part. Please tell me we can actually do this, Lisa said quietly as they walked back to their quarters. Please tell me the Helios project is ready. Kyle pulled out his secure communication device and opened a channel to Dr. Martin Cole. Martin was the lead scientist on the Helios project, and he was, currently aboard a research vessel in the Ross system. The quantum link connected after a few seconds, and Martin's face appeared on the small screen. He looked tired and worried. Martin, we need to move up the timeline, Kyle said without preamble. We need to run the full stellar stabilization test in 12 hours. Martin's eyes went wide behind his glasses. 12 hours? Kyle, we were planning to run that test in 3 months. We need more time to verify the calculations and run safety checks and prepare the equipment properly. We do not have 3 months. Kyle explained quickly what had happened in the tribunal. We either prove this works now or humanity loses everything. Martin ran his hands through his gray hair, making it stand up in wild directions. This is insane. The Helios technology has only been tested in simulations. We have never actually tried to stabilize a real star before. If something goes wrong, we could accidentally accelerate the star's death instead of extending its life. The Ross star is already dying, Kyle pointed out. The system is uninhabited.
If the test fails, the worst that happens is a star dies a few thousand years earlier than it would have naturally.
But if the test succeeds, we prove that humanity is not developing weapons. We prove that our research is about saving lives, not destroying them. Martin was silent for a long moment, staring at something off-screen. Kyle could see him doing calculations in his head, weighing risks and possibilities. Finally, he looked back at the camera and nodded slowly. All right, I will need my entire team working around the clock. We will have to skip some of the safety protocols, but if we are careful, and if we are lucky, then yes, we can be ready in 12 hours. Thank you, Martin. Kyle felt relief wash over him. I know this is asking a lot. You are asking us to save humanity, Martin said with a slight smile. I think that qualifies as a good reason to skip some paperwork. The connection ended and Kyle turned to his team. Lisa was already working on coordinating with Earth to get authorization for the test. Peter was setting up communication channels to broadcast the demonstration to the tribunal. Everyone moved with focused energy, knowing that failure was not an option. Over the next 11 hours, Kyle barely slept. He monitored the preparations in the Ross system through constant updates from Martin. The Helios project was humanity's attempt to develop stellar engineering technology. The idea was to use quantum field manipulation to stabilize the fusion reactions inside dying stars. If it worked, it could extend a star's life by hundreds of thousands of years. Entire civilizations could be saved from having to abandon their home systems as their suns faded. But the mathematics were incredibly complex. Stars were not simple machines. They were massive fusion reactors held together by gravity and powered by quantum processes that scientists were still trying to fully understand. Manipulating those processes required precision that pushed the limits of human technology. Ships from all 5 founding species arrived in the Ross system to set up monitoring stations. They surrounded the dying red dwarf with sensors and observation platforms. Kyle had invited them to watch closely, and they were taking him at his word. Every energy reading and every quantum fluctuation would be recorded by multiple independent sources. There would be no way to fake the results. The Ross star itself was a sad sight. Once it had been a healthy red dwarf that could have burned for trillions of years. But some ancient catastrophe had destabilized its core, and now it was dying slowly. The star had expanded and cooled, and its planets had been baked lifeless. In another few thousand years, it would collapse completely. It was the perfect test subject for the Helios technology. With 1 hour remaining, Kyle returned to the tribunal chamber. The gallery was packed now with representatives from dozens of species, all wanting to witness what would happen. The holographic display in the center of the chamber showed a live feed of the Ross star surrounded by monitoring stations. It looked small and dim and tired. Martin's voice came through the communication channel. "We are ready to begin on your command. All systems are functioning within acceptable parameters. The quantum field generators are charged and positioned correctly. We can proceed." Kyle looked up at the 5 platforms where the founding species sat in judgment. "Do you require any additional verification before we begin?" The Corthax representative gestured to someone off-screen, then spoke. "Our scientists confirm that your equipment is positioned around the star and appears to be active. We are reading massive energy signatures from your generators. We are prepared to monitor the demonstration." The Selenar's lights flashed in complex patterns. "We remind you that any deception will result in immediate guilty verdicts on all charges." "There will be no deception," Kyle said firmly. "What you are about to witness is the true purpose of humanity's stellar research. Dr. Cole, you are authorized to proceed with the Helios demonstration." The chamber fell completely silent. Every eye was on the holographic display showing the dying star. Martin's voice came through calm and professional despite the pressure. "Understood. Beginning activation sequence now. Quantum field generators are powering up, establishing resonance with the stellar core in 3 minutes." Kyle watched the data streams flowing across the display. Energy readings climbed steadily as the massive generators orbiting the star began to pulse with power. The technology was based on quantum field manipulation using principles that humanity had only recently discovered. If the calculations were correct, the generators would create a resonance field that connected directly to the fusion processes deep inside the star. "Resonance field established," Martin reported. "The generators are synchronized with the stellar core. We are now beginning the stabilization sequence. This is the critical phase. If the quantum matrix integrates properly, we should see an increase in fusion efficiency within the next 5 minutes." The star began to brighten visibly on the display. The change was subtle at first, just a slight increase in output. But as the minutes passed, the effect became more pronounced. The dim red dwarf was growing brighter and more stable. The data streams from the monitoring stations showed that the fusion reactions inside the core were changing, becoming more organized and efficient. The Corthax's monitoring team broadcast their analysis for everyone to hear. "We confirm increased stellar output. The energy signature is consistent with enhanced fusion reactions. This does not match the profile of a weapon activation." Kyle felt hope rising in his chest, but he kept his expression neutral. It was working, but the test was not over yet. The real question was whether the stabilization would hold, or whether the star would collapse back to its dying state. Introducing final quantum matrix parameters now, Martin said. This will lock in the stabilization effect. If successful, the star should maintain enhanced fusion for the foreseeable future. More minutes passed in tense silence. The star continued to brighten, reaching levels of output it had not achieved in thousands of years. The quantum field generators pulsed in perfect synchronization, creating a web of energy that embraced the dying star and gave it new life. Then the data stream stabilized. The star's output reached a new equilibrium point and held steady. The fusion reactions deep in the core had been permanently altered by the quantum manipulation. The star was no longer dying. It was renewed. The Seleners science team broadcast their findings. We confirm stable stellar fusion at enhanced levels. The quantum signature matches natural stellar processes, not artificial control. Based on our analysis, this star's main sequence lifetime has been extended by approximately 200,000 years. A wave of sound passed through the chamber as representatives reacted to what they had just witnessed. Kyle heard gasps and exclamations in dozens of different languages. They had expected to see either a weapon test or a failure. Instead, they had witnessed the birth of a new technology that could reshape the future of the galaxy. Martin's voice came through with barely suppressed excitement. The test is successful. All systems are performing within expected parameters. The raw star has been stabilized and will continue burning for hundreds of thousands of years beyond its natural lifespan. Kyle turned to face the 5 platforms. You have witnessed our technology in action. This is not a weapon. This is a tool for preservation and creation. Humanity's stellar research is about extending life, not destroying it. We dream of a future where civilizations do not have to abandon their home systems when their stars begin to fail. We dream of giving dead stars new life. The Yalith's branches moved in slow, complex patterns. This is remarkable. We did not anticipate such an application of quantum stellar manipulation. We believed you were developing weapons because we could not imagine any other purpose for such technology. You believed the worst of us without asking, Kyle said, and now he allowed some of his anger to show. You saw equations that resembled weapons research and immediately concluded we were building instruments of destruction. You never considered that we might be trying to build something beautiful instead. The Verdine's mandibles clicked rapidly. The weapons charge is clearly unfounded. We acknowledge this. However, the other charges remain and must still be addressed. Do they? Kyle asked. Or have we proven that every charge brought against humanity was based on fear and misunderstanding? You accused us of military expansion, but we showed that our forces are proportionally smaller and purely defensive. You accused us of aggressive colonization, but we proved we followed every law and claimed only abandoned worlds. You accused us of cultural contamination, but the species we helped spoke in our defense. And now the weapons charge has been completely disproven. He paused and looked around the chamber at all the watching representatives. What this tribunal has really shown is that the Galactic Cooperative applies its laws unequally. When the founding species expanded, it was natural growth. When we expand, it is aggression. When you compete economically, it is free trade. When we compete successfully, it is disruption. You brought us here not because we broke any laws, but because our success threatens your control over the galaxy. The chamber erupted with noise as younger species began talking and gesturing among themselves. Kyle had said what many of them had been thinking for years. The noise in the tribunal chamber grew louder as younger species began openly discussing what Kyle had said. Representatives who had sat silently for days were now standing and talking with their neighbors. Some looked angry, while others seemed excited. The carefully controlled atmosphere of the tribunal was breaking down, and the 5 founding species could see their authority slipping away. The Korthax representative rose to his full, imposing height, and his voice boomed through the chamber. You overstep your bounds, Ambassador Martinez. We are the judges here, not you. You stand accused, and you will show proper respect. Respect must be earned, Kyle said firmly. You summoned us here claiming to uphold justice, but what I have witnessed is not justice. It is an attempt to suppress a competitor using the legal system as a weapon. Every charge you brought was either false or based on selective application of laws that you yourselves violated when you were younger species. The Verdine's mandibles clicked sharply. You speak of things you do not understand. The cooperative has maintained peace and stability for thousands of years. Your species threatens that stability with your aggressive expansion and your refusal to accept your proper place in the galactic order. And what is our proper place? Kyle asked. Subordinate to you? Limited in our growth so we never become powerful enough to challenge your control? That is not cooperation. That is domination. One of the younger species representatives stood up in the gallery. It was the Bentar delegate who had spoken earlier in defense of humanity. The human ambassador speaks truth that many of us have felt but feared to voice. The founding species maintain their power by keeping the rest of us small and dependent. We follow rules that they themselves do not follow. We accept limitations that they never accepted for themselves. Another representative stood, and then another. Within moments, a dozen younger species delegates were on their feet. One of them, from a species called the Moxar, spoke in a clear voice. I represent a civilization that has been part of the cooperative for 800 years. In all that time, we have requested permission to expand into 3 neighboring sectors. Each request was denied because a founding species claimed future interest in those sectors. Meanwhile, those same founding species have expanded into hundreds of sectors during the same period. Where is the justice in that? The Torvan representative's tank bubbled with agitation. You do not understand the responsibilities of maintaining galactic order. Younger species must be guided carefully to prevent chaos and conflict. Guided or controlled? Kyle asked. There is a difference. Guidance means teaching others to make good decisions. Control means making decisions for them and punishing them when they try to think for themselves. The Selenar flashed bright, angry colors. This is unacceptable. The tribunal will not tolerate such disrespect and insubordination. Then punish me. Kyle spread his arms wide. Find humanity guilty and impose whatever sanctions you were already planning. But do it publicly so everyone can see exactly what kind of justice the Galactic Cooperative provides. Show everyone that success and innovation are crimes if they threaten the established order. The 5 founding species conferred urgently through their private channels. Kyle could see that they were losing control of the situation. What had been designed as a simple proceeding to humble humanity had turned into something much larger. The younger species were becoming emboldened. Questions were being asked that should not be asked. The entire power structure of the cooperative was being challenged. The Yaleth's branches moved in slow, contemplative patterns. Finally, the ancient being spoke in a voice that was quieter than before. Ambassador Martinez has raised points that deserve consideration. This tribunal has not proceeded as cleanly as it should have. Perhaps we have allowed our concerns about rapid change to cloud our judgment. The Korthak started to protest, but the Yaleth silenced him with a gesture. No, we must be honest with ourselves and with the cooperative. Humanity has succeeded remarkably well in a short time, and rather than welcoming a new partner, we have sought to limit them. That is not what the cooperative was meant to be. The Yaleth turned to address the entire chamber. 6,000 years ago, 5 species came together to form the Galactic Cooperative. We did so because we believed that working together was better than competing separately. We created laws and institutions to maintain peace and enable mutual prosperity. But somewhere along the way, we forgot that cooperation means partnership, not hierarchy. We began to see ourselves as rulers rather than equals. The ancient being's branches swayed gently. Humanity has forced us to confront this truth. They have shown us that our laws are applied unequally, and that our institutions have become tools of control rather than justice. For this uncomfortable revelation, we owe them thanks, not punishment. The other 4 representatives looked uncertain. The Verdine's mandibles clicked nervously. What are you proposing? A reformation, the Yaleth said. The cooperative's charter was written thousands of years ago when all member species were at similar developmental stages. It does not adequately address the situation we face now with species at vastly different levels of advancement. We need new laws that apply equally to everyone regardless of how long they have been members. We need institutions that give all species a voice in governance, not just the founding 5. That would fundamentally change the power structure of the cooperative. The Selenar's lights flickered with concern. Yes, it would, the Yaleth agreed. It would make us truly cooperative rather than oligarchic. Is that not what we claimed to be all along? The chamber was silent now as everyone waited to see what would happen. Kyle felt his heart pounding, but he kept his face calm. This was more than he had hoped for. The Yaleth was proposing exactly the kind of reform that the galaxy needed. The Korthak spoke slowly as if the words were difficult. You suggest we surrender our authority to younger species who may not be ready for such responsibility. I suggest we share authority with partner species who have proven themselves capable, the Yalith corrected. Humanity has demonstrated remarkable innovation and principle in the face of enormous pressure. Other younger species have shown similar qualities. Perhaps it is we who are not ready to accept that we are no longer the only powers in the galaxy. The Torvin's tank bubbled thoughtfully. This is a significant proposal. It cannot be decided hastily, then let us not decide it hastily, the Yalith said. I propose that this tribunal be concluded with the verdict of not guilty for humanity on all charges. The evidence has shown that while humanity has been aggressive in its expansion, it has not violated cooperative law. Furthermore, I propose that we convene a constitutional convention in 3 months. All cooperative member species will be invited to send delegates. The charter will be reviewed and revised to ensure equal application of law and fair representation for all. Kyle felt relief washing over him, but he was not ready to celebrate yet. There was one more thing that needed to be said. I have a condition for humanity's participation in such a convention, the Korthax growled. You are hardly in a position to set conditions, I think I am. Kyle gestured to the gallery filled with representatives from younger species. The cooperative is bigger than just the founding 5 now. If you want true reform, then you need to ensure that all voices are heard, not just the powerful ones. My condition is simple. The Constitutional Convention must include full and equal representation from all member species. Every civilization gets a vote on the new charter regardless of how old or powerful they are. The 5 founding species looked at each other. Kyle could see them weighing their options. They could reject his condition and try to force through a verdict, but that would likely lead to open rebellion from the younger species. Or they could accept the condition and hope to shape the reform process to maintain some of their authority. The Yalith's branches settled into a pattern that might have been acceptance. Your condition is reasonable, we agree. The Constitutional Convention will include full representation from all member species. Each civilization will have equal voice and equal vote. The chamber erupted with sound as representatives reacted to the announcement. Kyle heard cheers from some delegates and angry muttering from others. The galaxy had just changed in ways that would take years to fully understand. The Torvin spoke for all 5 founding species. This tribunal finds humanity not guilty of all charges. The accusations of military expansion, aggressive colonization, cultural contamination, and weapons development are dismissed. Furthermore, we apologize to humanity for the manner in which this proceeding was conducted. Ambassador Martinez, your courage and principle have served your species well. Kyle bowed respectfully. Thank you. Humanity looks forward to working with all species to build a better cooperative. One based on true partnership and mutual respect. As the formal proceedings concluded, Kyle was immediately surrounded by delegates from dozens of younger species. They shook his hand in various alien ways and thanked him for speaking truths that they had been too afraid to voice. Lisa fought her way through the crowd with tears in her eyes, and Peter looked like he might faint from relief and excitement. The founding species delegates watched from their platforms with mixed expressions. Some looked resentful while others seemed thoughtful. The Yalith remained in place long after the others had left. Kyle noticed the ancient being watching him and walked over. You took an enormous risk today, Ambassador. The Yalith's branches moved in complex patterns. If events had gone differently, humanity could have been destroyed. I know, Kyle said. But some things are worth risking everything for. Justice is one of them. The future is another. You have changed the galaxy in ways that cannot be undone, the Yalith said. I hope you understand the responsibility that comes with that. I do. Kyle looked around at the celebrating delegates and the historic chamber. Humanity did not come to the stars seeking to dominate anyone. We came seeking partners and friends. We came hoping to build something better together. Today we took the first real step toward making that hope a reality. The Yalith's branches moved in what might have been a smile. Perhaps that is why younger species are so valuable. They still remember how to hope. We old ones had forgotten. Then maybe that is what this reformation is really about. Kyle said. Not just changing laws and institutions, but remembering why we formed the cooperative in the first place, to work together toward a future where all species can thrive. A worthy goal, the Yalith agreed. I look forward to seeing what humanity contributes to that future. As Kyle left the tribunal chamber for the last time, he looked up at the dome showing the galaxy in all its vastness. Somewhere out there, the Ross star burned bright again, given new life through human ingenuity. It was a symbol of what could be accomplished when intelligence and compassion worked together. The cooperative had tried to punish humanity for daring to excel, but in the end, humanity had given the galaxy something far more valuable. A chance to be better than it was, a chance to live up to its founding ideals, a chance to truly cooperate rather than simply coexist. The galaxy would never be the same, and Kyle thought that was a very good thing indeed.